just wait here, and finally I have finished my Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior 3D print. Actually, technically it's not finished, but it is 96.5% complete.
Yes, that's right, but we don't need to get caught up in all the small details. Once wife Jackie and I arrive home, I'll add a few more items to the interior of the mighty Interceptor. Then I'll chuck the big girl on a turntable for a more detailed video viewing down the track. As for now, well, after many hours of printing, sanding and painting, not to mention problem solving, my 1/8 scale Gambody Mad Max 2 Interceptor is officially complete. It's hard to believe it all began when I found this advert on Facebook for a 1/8 scale die-cast Mad Max Interceptor, which absolutely took my breath away. The other thing that took my breath away was the price. At over $2,500, well, there had to be a better way for me to own my very own Mad Max Interceptor. And there was, because I bought a 3D printer, a Prusa Mark IVS kit, which I assembled myself. And the rest, as they say, is history, as I began my 3D printing journey with the Gambody Interceptor, the car that is featured in the Australian cult classic Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior. And after printing the entire body, all the internals and those giant gasoline tanks, it was time for me to move on to the suspension.
Rear suspension, 5-hour print.
Now, my very first printing project wasn't without its problems, but all the problems I encountered, I quickly found a solution to, and I put that down to assembling my Prusa Mark IVS 3D printer myself.
Time to print out the fuel tank and the spare tyre. It's a 6-hour print time.
Building the 3D printer myself definitely gave me the ability to troubleshoot problems. And now that the entire body of the Mad Max 2 Interceptor was finished, I was keen to continue with the front suspension.
More front suspension prints. And now, it's time to start printing the wheels.
Each wheel and its parts would take around 10 hours to print, and whilst this was going on, I was painting all the internal parts to Max's Interceptor. All those little items you don't necessarily take notice of until you intend to build one of the most accurate Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior Interceptor models in the world. In fact, it was all these little 3D objects I had so much fun hunting for on the internet. Little things that added so much more authenticity to this model. And yes, I did find some use for my clear filament, because I definitely was not going to get the desired effect for glass without using clear packaging, like a yogurt lid, that I was sure of. And talking about packaging, well, the small boxes that came with my Prusa 3D printer was ideal for a dinky-dyed dog food box. Items were coming off my heat bed at a rapid rate now that all the large parts had now been printed.
Alright, some front suspension components. Max will need a shovel. Maybe he needs to bury some bodies.
The air filter that sits in the back of Max's Interceptor was printed, but the inside filter was pallet strapping I found on the farm. I definitely think this is the way to go to achieve a clear glass effect on a 1/8 scale model. But unfortunately the yogurt we buy does not come with a large enough lid to do the Interceptor's windscreen, so I will need to find something larger. Weathering and texturing was such a fun part of this model build for me, and I must say I found I continually needed to remind myself that less is more. Not to worry though, because I used harder enamel paints for my base coats. It was an easy process to sand the acrylic paint back, giving the Interceptor a more realistic and dusty look. All my wheels had now been printed.
Take the edge off this wheel.
Of course, Mad Max would need a shovel. You never know when you might need to hide a gasoline stash by burying it in the Wasteland. All the internal items that I found for Max's Interceptor were free on the numerous 3D sites one can find on the internet. Now it was time to move on to one of the last objects I needed to print. The exhaust system, with those famous 8 protruding exhaust pipes that rear out like venomous snakes behind the Interceptor's 2 doors. I drilled the exhaust out whilst thinning the inside walls. And once that was done, I would need to move on to adding the weathering and texturing along with scratches and wear and tear to the undercarriage of the Interceptor. I also intend to add a lot of mud texture by using wood putty, but I'll do that when we leave the farm and move back home. Of course, I'll also need to print the bomb mechanism and the knife Max hides under the wheel arch of the car. And last but not least, I'll need some rope, because of course Max Rokotansky would have had rope in his Interceptor. I didn't bother cleaning the exhaust pipes too much because once I painted them it would just look like mud. What a 3D journey this has been, bringing the iconic Mad Max 2, the Road Warrior Interceptor to life. I have had so much fun printing this 1/8 scale legendary V8 Pursuit Special. All the objects that sit in Max's car now needed a layer of dust. My 1/8 scale Mad Max 2, the Road Warrior Interceptor, was now getting serious. I have gained so much experience with this deep dive into the 3D printing world, and I was really enjoying myself now. I did think about trying to pull the Dinky Die logo off the net and printing it on the box, but in the end that proved way too hard. It was easier to draw the logo freehand. Before fully closing the Interceptor up, I even added shotgun cartridges.
"1.5 hour print for the windscreen, and no, I'm not using it. I have a plastic clear bottle that I will shape onto this so that I know it will be perfect."
Just a note to everyone, a plastic bottle is no good for a windscreen because they have not one, but two joins in them. In the end, I used the lid from some plastic packaging that contained 4 large chocolate chip muffins. And I've now put the word out to the entire family to always keep any clear packaging that I can use on future 3D printing projects. And now that the entire car was assembled, I continued to add the finer details to make this as accurate to the movie car as possible. It's not as easy as it sounds considering they used 3 different cars during the filming of Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior. But in the end, the majority of screenshots I used for reference were from the beginning of the film. And remember when I said less is more? Well, now I was using some fine emery cloth with water to thin out the acrylic paint, bringing through the gloss black Duco. This technique really made the car pop and gave it a much more realistic look. And now that the inside of the car was all assembled, I could add the final layer of dust to the inside of the doors, floor and seat. as I added the final minute details. I couldn't help but think of all those hours of printing, sanding, painting and problem solving it took to bring this 1/8 scale Gambody Mad Max 2 Interceptor to life. This being my first ever 3D print, well, it's been what I can only describe as a wild ride. From that first layer to these final details, I have poured everything into bringing this iconic beast to life. It was really looking dusty, dirty, and like it had just rolled straight out of the Wasteland. And I'll tell you what, I could not be prouder of how this model was turning out.
Now that the hard part was done and the model is complete, I really wanted to get some fantastic photographs and make them as realistic as possible. But that, my friends, isn't quite as easy as what one would think.
Yes, indeed. Not only have I found myself falling down the rabbit hole of the 3D printing world, I now need to find some awesome ways to showcase my models. Close-ups are fine, but getting a shot of the entire model and making it look as realistic as possible, well, that's another thing. In the end, I found a nice red patch of dirt on the farm, and with the help of some scrap materials, I think I did a pretty good job. But there's a lot of room for improvement, and I am looking forward to the challenge.
Thanks everyone for joining me on my very first 3D printing project. And I cannot tell you how much fun I have had. It has been an absolute blast. And kudos to the folks from Gambody for building such an awesome Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior 3D printable model. And I cannot wait to start my next 3D printing project, which I'll be sharing with you all. So until then, happy 3D printing and thanks for watching everyone.